I was going to say, Rich, you're on mute, but it seems that I was on mute. Mute yourself, and we can get started.
Hi,
Hello, how are you?
how are you? That's more important.
I'm good, I'm good.
So yeah, I mean, we have Radhika Gupta here. Bhanu Athaiya. I think Bridge is going to give an introduction, and we'll get started.
Yes, I mean, firstly, it's just so exciting every time we have a discussion on Bhanu's legacy and, the fact that we as a research-driven auction house have had the opportunity to work with you so closely, Radhika ji, and actually go through this entire process. Not that you really need any introduction, but for those who are new to this, Radhika Gupta has spent most of her life researching crafts and was involved in innumerable handicraft-specific projects. She founded the first handicraft-based lifestyle store Habitat in Kolkata in 1993. She trained local people with disabilities to create crafts which were then retailed from the store. She is a member of the Darecha Foundation, a Kolkata-based NGO that promotes folk and tribal heritage and pursues her passion for Indian handicrafts as a consultant. She has played a key role as historical researcher in several important exhibitions. These included 150 Years of Kolkata Police and Nari, an exposition at Victoria Memorial on 300 years of women in Kolkata for the city's tercentenary. She has also helped set up the Kolkata Police Museum. Over the last 8 years, she has been working in Mumbai with her mother on the project closest to her heart, the preservation of her mother, Bhanu Athaiya's 75-year-old legacy for posterity. Once again, we're thrilled to be, dwelling into this conversation and discussing this legacy with you. I think we'll just jump into the many questions that we keep having and troubling you also with. So I'll just, Indrajit, if you don't mind, I'll just share my screen so we can get a bit of a pictorial. I hope that's visible to everybody. Yeah. All right, great. So, I mean, I'll just go into, this is the Bhanu Athaiya studio. And I mean, it would be great if you can tell us a little bit about this space. As one can see, there's a lot going on.
Well, she bought this place in 1978 when she was working in another garage next door, because she had over time collected so much material that she needed a place to store it. She was also very keen on having small exhibitions at one point, because she was a great collector of photographs. But her work in the films kept her so occupied. And also she decided to branch off into calendars, theater, and art films, which were art films then really. But, so she was so occupied that she never really got around to having an exhibition. But over the years, she collected innumerable number of photographs, for instance, of Kolhapur, because she felt that she owed so much to her upbringing in that city that she wanted to bring out a book on that. As you will see, the collection, I keep diving into trunks and I come out with more and more pictures every time. So it was obviously a great passion for her and a kind of dedication to the city that made her what she was. It really opened up all her senses to art, creativity, color, and beauty. So here, soon one part of her studio became a boda, where extra clothes would be stored. Like when she did, say, Reshma Shera in the old days, or when she did Amrapali, she did everybody's costumes, including the attendants, the handmaidens, all their costumes were done. So there were a lot of extra costumes that were needed because during shooting, those days, you must remember that there were no air-conditioned vanity vans or air-conditioned studios. It was one dusty milieu where the pancake on the face would melt during shooting. So that would ruin the clothes. So she did have a lot of extra clothes kept of the people who were dancing or going back and forth, and old villagers and things like that. But the main stars' costumes invariably went to the studio, production house. It was kept there, or it had got ruined with the bright lights and the dust.
When would have been the last time Bhanu would have visited the studio?
Oh, she was there till 2015. She used to go every morning at 10 o'clock, and she would lock it up at 6:30. She'd be sitting there rummaging through her stuff and would promise me that I didn't need to go there to help her because she was going to sort it out. And invariably, she got so caught up with it that she couldn't discard a thing, which has turned out to be a great boon for all of us. Because right from little paintings which were damaged or torn, everything has now been collated, more or less collated. I think I've gone through about 90% of what she has collected. There's still some left, and I don't know what will spring out of that box. But, it's just that during the time that she spent till then, she fell ill in 2012, and till 15, she was really in. She could communicate, she could work, but she used to get tired. But yet she succeeded in sorting the things into various lots, like village costumes.
Can I just interrupt?
I'm sorry, some needle mishap. Anyway, so coming back to what she did, she managed to sort out some of it. But there was something like over 110 trunks.
Oh, wow. And how are things saved in these trunks? Because I mean, in a place like Bombay, which is so humid, and in terms of like preservation of something, getting rid of like pests, or actually making sure that there are no pests, there are no.
Well, because it was opened regularly, one thing about the characteristic of these termites is that if you keep walking around and opening the place up and there's activity, they don't flourish. It's only in dank, closed rooms that they really flourish. So because thankfully she was visiting it every day, and from 2012, I was getting pest control done there 4 times a year.
Wow.
Even though she insisted that that would spoil her things, but there was no way, because at that stage we were desperately looking for somebody or some museum or some government agency that would help us catalog everything.
Absolutely.
It was a task that was too big for the two of us. And my mother was, as you can imagine, extremely possessive about letting her stuff go to anybody who really know how to take care of it. So unfortunately, we hit a dead end every time. Nothing seemed to work out. So it just stayed there till when she couldn't go to the workshop from 2016 January onwards. I was dispatched there at least 2 times a week to ensure that I cleaned the place up and got it all right. That's when I started rummaging. I must admit a lot of papers got lost, which fortunately were things like old bills and all that. So we were lucky. But her paintings were all in trunks, in thick plastic packets. I think that's what saved them.
Wow. I mean, you're talking about the paintings. Could you, I mean, I think I have a few images here as well. If you could tell us a little bit about the discovery of these the artworks that were not, documented.
Yeah, these were not documented at all because I didn't.
Some were, some were you find.
Yeah, some were
next slide. If you next slide, yeah. The next slide.
In fact, the next slide,
yeah,
the right-hand one was published in her book. And she had removed it from the frame to get a better picture. But it was all dumped together after that. And for instance, the one on the left, I recall seeing it, but I must have been a kid when I saw it. After that, I've never seen it because it was just kept rolled up. It was never framed. She wasn't very happy with it, including the one above which we first. These were all her artworks done at JJ during all her JJ practice. And below that, when you go to number, this was also in JJ, which she thought were like ordinary work that she did as part of her learning process. But the one below it, the two women, that was definitely one of the paintings that she liked very much. Thought it had, and it's decidedly there is an influence of Jamini Rai there.
Yes, absolutely. I was just going to say that.
Can you go back to the prayer, study for the prayers, first slide in the artworks? So what is interesting is on the reverse, it actually says All Saints Convent.
Oh, that's right. That's correct.
So
that's where she stayed with the nuns. Yeah. Before that, she used to stay at the YWCA, and before that, she stayed at the near the standing Khada Parsi statue. There's a hostel, a Catholic working women's hostel. She used to stay there, but she found that it was all everybody was in party mode, and like all young people, they were having fun. Yeah. But she had work to do, as she said, and she needed a peaceful place. So she managed to negotiate and get herself staying at this convent. And it's you can see that she's been observing all their daily rituals, so to speak, because she had even the other painting, which was the main one that she got her the gold medal at JJ. Mm-hmm. Even that one was done there, which a French art critic in one of the discussions where all these artists and writers would meet, he insisted it was the copy of an European work that she must have seen. Mm-hmm. It wasn't something from her environment, literally.
Wow.
You're talking about the lady in repose.
The lady, no, the nuns.
The nuns.
The nuns, the prayer.
Yeah, this one.
The prayer.
And in fact, I've discussed this figure on the left with, you had a short WhatsApp discussion with Ranjit as well, and classic 50s JJ. It's, and of course, Bhanu Athaiya's pinkish
white, the skin tone.
And some of the other sketches that we have seen. So of this, as Radhika was saying, a couple of the paintings we knew were documented, but we weren't able to find them. And because as luck would have it, one was ultimately able to. And they're all in decent. How they've survived.
Then even the highlights that she did in white behind certain paintings, the
right.
9 in 9 you will see that.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, even in terms of course, like some of these sketches as well. This one we have. This, of course, is a. Yeah, I mean, like, because moving from here, she goes to costume design, which is a totally different, um, process. And if could you walk us through that process? Because sometimes sketches, and especially at that time, are made just on like, historical, whatever research that she's done, because we're talking about a time where she was the pioneer in terms of like, creating this industry and like this um, entire platform.
Yeah, so I think the next last slide has some of her sketches. So we wanted to ask, sometimes for some of the movies, she did historical studies. And for some of the movies, it necessitated an actual from scratch.
Well, basically, for instance, in a contemporary scenario, like say the film Waqt, it had young women from different backgrounds. So she needed to create a body of sketches to show exactly what the wardrobe would be of each of the heroines, whether it was Sharmila Tagore or Sadhna or Shashikala or even Achla Sachdev, the mother. So, so that it would give the director an idea what the whole um, canvas would look like in terms of shade, jewelry, and that's how, for instance, she went into the churidar look for both Sadhna and Sharmila. And Sharmila is shown as the Shashi Kapoor's girlfriend, but she's more mellow in her dressing because she's not trying to she's trying to keep that status gap between them at the minimum. So she did things like that, whereas Sadhna had a lot of embroidered clothes that she was wearing, with some with pearls and stone settings. So you had a kind of canvas that was created, which set the mood for the whole period of that film. Whereas, say, an Amrapali was based on her research at Ajanta Ellora. And Vaijayanti Malaji was, as it is so gorgeously statuesque, and her Bharatnatyam training gave her such an excellent posture that she carried everything off with aplomb. Some of them, of course, were with like skin colored blouses, because those days a lot of the clothes seemed a bit forward because there was a lot more of skin exposure. As against, say, Satyam Shivam Sundaram, where Zinat didn't have any cover-ups, so to speak, of skin-colored sleeves, back and stomach, which even Helen had. Helen was very particular about not exposing too much skin, although she was the vamp. But she brought enough sizzle to the costume, even with that.
Wow. But how did these costumes sort of end up staying with at the studio in the trunks? Because usually I'm not sure, how does the process generally work in terms of like Bollywood film costumes back in the day?
Normally they go to the director. In fact, Raj Kapoor had a massive collection with him, which unfortunately got burnt.
Yes, of course.
Fire. But some of them, where she has, for instance, had to create a second or a third costume for the sake of continuity.
Correct.
The shooting schedule was longer than, and the cloth would just wear away. So she might have, there are pieces which are sort of half, you'll find parts of it have torn off or something like that. So she's got that sample with her, that's there. And for Swadesh, Gandhi, Lagan, created, you mustn't forget, for 10,000 people, the crowd sequences, for instance, for Gandhi's funeral.
Absolutely.
He had to create costumes from people from all religions, all walks of life, because it was such a big event. Everybody was
Point
shut.
of the historic, you get the historic theatrics in place, you always end up having a larger crowd, and you have to have like each of them so distinct with their costume, because even a film like Lagan, where you have, the different villagers and the different people around, they have to sort of fit that setting. So
Yes, and for
effortlessly.
instance, in Gandhi, it was such recent history, so she couldn't mess around with it.
Absolutely, yeah.
So she had to go by the references that she got from photographs and from books. So she didn't even need to make a sketch, because those looks actually adhered to the T. And whereas for costumes, films that were um, like a fantasy, say Prem Row, where there were lots of dream sequences,
Yeah.
she had to show what she was wanting the heroine and hero to be wearing. So for that, she had to have the sketch. So you could recreate the setting, the set design accordingly. And it was always she followed the director's thought as far as possible. She did make suggestions, especially in terms of color and how it would show up on the screen. Because her feel for color and textiles was exceptional.
Absolutely, absolutely. But was there like any, because we have so many of these sketches now, we find so many of these sketches housed as well as the costumes. Was there a way in which they were stored simultaneously, where you had a sketch and you had a costume, or was it very random in terms of?
No, it was never stored with the sketch and the costume together. It was sometimes with the sketch, you had little clippings of the shade and the color or the quality of the textile that was being used, the fabric that was being used. But aside from that, it was never put together. Because after a certain point, it's over 50 years of films. It's nearly 300 movies that she did. So you can imagine the level of costumes. And she was a one-woman army.
Wow.
She never had a backup staff to manage her stuff. She knew exactly what was where, and she would pull it out in that what to any of us would seem like a mess. Because there were boxes and boxes and boxes.
It was an organized mess. So she.
It's an organized, and it was, she knew exactly what she was looking for. We would have been just floundering and hunting for something. So that, and since she didn't have, her way of making a costume, by the way, say, for instance, costumes that were made with expensive fabric, which had to be very extravagant. She would make a sample of the basic cut and fitting on plain malmal or marking kapra, so that the cloth never got, the original fabric didn't get spoiled by, adjusting the fitting at the trials.
Absolutely.
So that's how she worked.
And I mean, given that, this is a question that I think we've sort of like gone over and over quite a few times. But given that we have, this, this entire legacy of hers as material culture, quite literally, how do you envision it being housed or stored and really put across as her legacy? Like, what would you feel would be the best way in which these pieces could be
I would feel that if these were in a kind of museum-like setup, where they were accessible to people, because digitizing is fine for a large number of students uh, of filmmaking, of film costumes. But there is also that touch and feel fabric, the embroidery, the kind of work that has gone into it. There's a lot of her embroidery pieces that she's collected over time, which I've just collected and kept in 2 trunks. They're packed to the gills, and it's so, you can look at it, you can figure out where it was used, in what costume it was used, and how much. Because at the end of the day, you really have so many sequins and so many braids and so many fabrics, but how she used it, like she used to do patchwork. Her tailors in the studio would make it. She'd do the design and then they'd be cutting pieces and joining them and making them. So, it immediately gives the dress a totally different look.
100%.
So basically, for that reason, I feel that maybe if it's in a museum, it would be more accessible to everybody to understand also what goes into the whole process.
Absolutely.
Of costume designing, where you are sticking to the period, you're sticking to the look of that social strata, and you are constantly working within a budget. That is also very important, because the budgets were so low that you had to create that wow factor with fewer funds.
Definitely. And we're talking about a time when there weren't stylists and all these other add-ons. Right?
And
Just-
also the budgets were much smaller these days.
Hmm.
I mean, even a Sahib Bibi Ghulam or Lekin, they had much smaller budgets than the kind of movies you see today. Say you see a Kabhi Khushi Kabhi Gum, their budgets are massive. So, and they're creating what she referred to as fancy clothes. She would bracket them into fantasy, because they were clothes that weren't worn by the ordinary person you would come across.
Correct.
Even if it was a star at a party on a cruiser, it would still be a little over the top.
Absolutely. While her trends, such as the churidar, for example, was something that sort of caught on to, like, I think every single girl at that point, at that age. So I guess that's how influential and how
Yash Chopra used to say that the women in Delhi would send their tailor to go and to watch the movie, buy tickets for them to watch the movie so that he'll copy the dress exactly. So that was quite funny, actually. And even say over in Gandhi, the jackets, the suits that were used, the clothes that Kasturba wore, you had to create that look with modern fabrics.
Absolutely.
You don't, you still get a khadi sari, but for a movie, it may not drape as well. It may not look good on screen. It may bloat out. At that time also there wasn't so much of development in the khadi sector. Now you're getting finer and finer khadi available and colors. That time it was basic, a kora kapda or a cream color or a white, and she had to dye it in either vegetable diet or chemically dyed so that she could create that tone.
Absolutely, that's true.
Mentioning photographs, really this workshop had a lot of photographs. Mentioning that she wanted to do us on focus a little bit on that.
Well,
and the photographs are not just restricted to Kolhapur. There's Kolhapur, and there's all the Bollywood photographs, the slides. I mean, clearly somebody was a collector of photographs.
She was a collector. There's a whole section on photographs from Hyderabad. Then she has beautiful old prints, old fine pen and ink sketches. So she was really looking at cataloging a kind of different ages, in a sense, for posterity. She was very enamored with Kolhapur, for instance, because it was a place like that at that point. There was cinema, theatre, art, musical variety, because the Maharaja patronized it.
The creative is flourishing in the
Everybody, it was something that everybody enjoyed and was exposed to. So she was very keen on letting the world know what a place Kolhapur was, so that people could do so many things. I mean, in our own house, my grandparents' house, everybody from Bhanu painter would be Abalal. They would all come there and they'd be chatting and they'd be having their adda sessions and music programs, singing programs, and every sister of my mother's was trained in something or the other, whether it was painting or singing or dancing. So that creative influence was something which her father tried to expose everybody to, including his wife, that's my grandmother. It got her threads, so she started doing embroidery, and they were all prize-winning pieces. So she wanted to, and because of that, she was also very keen that in the collection, she had the Shahu Maharaj's family and the pictures and how progressive they were. The Maharani would go tiger shooting, she'd go, so she'd go and meet the dignitaries. She wasn't in Parda. She wasn't sitting at home all the time. She was there and traveling abroad and dressing in Western clothes. So, like most Maharaja families across our country that were doing it. So, she was very keen on getting some sense out of this. So, she was keen on a book on Kolhapur, which showed all these aspects.
So, as a small favor, you get the PowerPoint up again. I just want
yeah.
talk of the person, not the introduction. But so, point agenda of this Zoom call. Thank Radhika into how, when I first met her, unfortunately, I was then I spent a lot of time, but it was not clear to me the arduous task and the amount of work it has and it would have taken to organize this huge workshop.
Absolutely. I mean, because the legacy is such, I mean, there's so much, and it's literally over, I mean, it's like 3 generations of films in a sense, like
and 3 almost large.
These different eras of films where she has contributed in such a monumental way. So the task of actually consolidating this and I don't know.
She had very interest. You see, she had very interest. She loved the books. She loved.
My point was not. My point was single-handedly Radhika. That without her hard work, and a lot of the stuff has actually come to us organized and sorted. Like all the artworks, for example, they were all sorted. The sketches and all. Sketches have been entirely digitized at this point. The and all the costumes, etc. A lot of sorting was done. In my defense, I did offer every now and then, can I help? Like, no, I understand this thing.
Well, basically, because I know that if somebody who's not familiar with her and her thinking and her approach would not have been able to see the importance in little things. Absolutely. And they would say, "Kharab ho gaya, phek do, isko rakhne se kya fayda? Why must we keep this?" it's not important. But over the years, one has seen what was important. I mean, whether it was her meticulously drawing out a design for a sari, embroidery, the border, the archal, and keeping the exact shade of mauve or purple and the exact shades of three greens,
And just to mention, the sketches all survived superbly because they were all inside plastic sheets, and
that's what I managed to do, thankfully, when I used to be sent off to look after her place and clean it. That's what I sat and did, because I knew that because I didn't open the place often enough, they might, and a lot of things have been destroyed over time. And it was heartbreaking to see some beautiful books I had to throw away. I just didn't want to, because they were fantastic record of times. And I don't know, it was a monumental task, I must admit. I will share a couple of the pictures, how in 3 areas, it was literally stuff all the way up to the ceiling, piled up like a mountain. And there was I trying to burrow through them. But we've been very fortunate that a lot of it has survived. We've really been lucky.
No, we're all lucky, I think. We're all lucky that we've gotten to that you've sort of salvaged things as well as given us a larger
put up some toys of Bhanu Athaiya as well. Not things that she used to play with, and not if you can see these. Really old, we have a whole collection of toys that were discovered as well. Almost close to 100-year-old toys, and so a lot of stuff has been, the preservation has been amazing, and the pictures from Kolhapur also fascinating. They almost they all seem like 20s and
that's right, 1903 onwards.
1903 onwards. I mean, lots of pictures, and it's really fascinating how much has survived. And of course, thanks again to Radhika Gupta, that if it wasn't for her and single-handed effort, a lot of it would not have been extracted.
Oh, absolutely.
I just want to clearly record that.
No, it really matters. It was my mother's life. That really was her life. And I keep feeling that she's smiling down on us, that she's seeing it's being handled by the right people. So we are lucky that my mom and I are lucky that we found people who respect cataloging and the historical importance of certain. Most people don't. So the value of that legacy now suddenly has become manifold.
Legacy, but the value is immaterial. Legacy itself.
I think that's the reason you need a place such as a museum, which can house these and also make it accessible for people to really see these things, cherish these pieces, and sort of be inspired from this legacy, because there are so many students out there who have Bhanu as their inspiration and idol in so many different ways. So I think
we mustn't forget that in her time she was the buyer of the fabric, she was the embroiderer, the design for that, she did the sketch, she had it tailored, she got the jewelry, the shoes, the bags. So it wasn't like today's outfits where the designer has a team that does the sketches, there's somebody else who collects the fabrics. So it was all in one little head that all this was constantly churning. So that I think is phenomenal, that a person is able to channelize their creativity in various areas. Nothing was undoable for her. I mean, there was just, whether it was embroidery, she'd sit with the embroiderer and, get a costume done overnight. That was, she just managed to get the people to do the work that were just the right people.
Right, thank you very much. Thanks, Ishwari as well.
Well, thank you so much. It's been just always interesting to learn and, keep discovering Bhanu Athaiya's legacy. And we really hope that we can kind of do justice
And Rishi, I hope you realize there's a lot of hard work ahead of us.
entirely to this monumental but very exciting task. Yeah.
Yeah,